Vince Staples, Dark Times album review. Let's chat about it. Hey friends, what's going on? John here from What's Spinning here tonight to chat about this latest album from Mr. Vince Staples, California-based MC. He's been at it for some time now, and in his early days, I would say that Vince's music kind of saved rap for me in a way. I hadn't listened to a lot of modern hip-hop in a while, and his early recordings, whether it be the Hell Can Wait mini album or his debut, Summertime '06, these were records that instantly kind of got me back into the modern hip-hop scene, mostly because of the sort of dark and gritty and very real beats that Vince was popping up on, as well as his storytelling and lyricism, which I thought was absolutely impeccable. The guy had a way of bringing together some really wild, eclectic club bangers, but also had a very introspective and sort of tortured side to him as well, and I really appreciated all of that. Also, his next album, Big Fish Theory, one of this generation's genuinely most experimental and freakish alternative hip-hop albums. Really exciting stuff, and probably the last time that I truly clicked with Vince's music, unfortunately. After that, the Prima Donna EP, I thought this thing was a major misstep and had some of Vince's clunkiest work to date. Also, the features, I just was not feeling this thing. His FM album, I thought it was bubbly and colorful, and certainly fun for the summer, but was also a major direction turn for Vince, and I wasn't really into some of the later and poppier tracks on there. Also, his last two records, his self-titled album and Ramona Park, broke my heart. Both of these albums had such a great bass to them, like a really fantastic atmosphere and some great production, but time after time, Vince seemingly just did not show up fully to the dance, I felt like. These albums just had a really great bass to them, but he just didn't take the ideas to them far enough. Now, this album was only announced about a week ago that it was coming out, and now that it's here, you know, it's a pretty short and sweet album, 10, 11 tracks, 35 minutes or so, and honestly, you can count me back in on the music of Vince Staples. Early on, with the Shame on the Devil single that he dropped, I mean, it was pretty clear that Vince was really diving back down that sort of dark and tortured rabbit hole, and the rest of this album follows suit. Black and Blue early on, this track is no freaking joke. I love the sort of darkened boom bap beat that we get, and in a seriously tragic, very dreary backdrop and a very focused performance from Vince, you have a hell of an opening track. This, to me, is what I've been waiting for. This has the sound of Vince's last two projects, but a lot more well thought out. It's really confident and all around. Vince's lyrics, man, they haven't been this introspective and visual in years. Not only that, but this haunted hook is one of the most mesmerizing things in hip-hop I've heard all year. And while a short sample size, this very, short, sweet, but very to the point sung hook from Vince shows that his vocals have grown quite a bit. We'll hear more of those later. Government Cheese, from the first time I heard it, I thought this track was a major standout. This classy, very dreary-eyed piano beat really does take me back. But not only just as far as the sort of dreary beat and the tortured vibes go, I mean from a lyrical stance as well. I mean, Vince really does sound like he's back in that sort of conscious, very introspective mindset, and it's where he flourishes. And yeah, this track has a lot of tension and a whole lot of depressive, almost suicidal vibes to it at points. Not only that, but it also has some throwback synths that will take, the fans of the early sort of odd future sound that Vince was associated with, brings it back full force, and it's pretty classy. No, not this album, though. Not that one. Really do love Children's Song as well. Once again, lyrically, I can't think of the time in the last few years that I've been this captivated by Vince's stuff. Probably since Big Fish Theory, honestly. I love the strummed, very off-kilter beat that we get here. It's one of the more experimental cuts that we get on this album. And while Vince's performance on this track might be a little bit more subdued, he comes off just as focused. Shame on the Devil, I mean, my thoughts on this track really haven't changed that much. I still do really love it. Really love the haunting backing vocals done by Baby Rose on this track as well. I mean, this just sets the tone for this whole album. It is so subdued, so hushed, so quiet. I mean, something about this track just gets under my skin in the best way. It's so haunting and so memorable. And Étouffée, honestly, for me, might be the best deep cut on this album. This dark yet strangely bubbly beat brings me back to the times of Summertime '06. It's definitely a vibe, but once again, I continue to come back to the storytelling from Vince. And this just might be me, but as far as a hook goes, I can't find a better one on this album. This sung hook is really impressive. It's very eerie, almost campy at points, but it's also insanely memorable. And not for nothing, but a lot of the interludes on this record are far from just phoned in. They're nothing to sneeze at. Like Close Your Eyes and Swing as an intro to this album. What an atmosphere on this track. Like, there's just such a realistic gut punch to this. Not only does it have a sense of dread, but it has a sense of just a very real, very human dread. It's simple, but it's so effective. And Liars, once again, halfway through this album, far from just a toss-away interlude, it adds a lot. The voice sampling, the dreary beat, the monochromatic production, all of this adds to the greater themes of this record. And yeah, there are a couple of late album tracks that definitely raise some red flags for me, and absolutely show Vince kind of sinking into some older habits. Radio, definitely Radio. I mean, this album has been so consistent so far, but this track sounds like a leftover from one of his last two records. This beat just seems really out of place, and this hook, if you want to call it that, is more annoying than anything. There's just such a dip in quality on this track, and it's really frustrating. And honestly, I don't know what the hell happened on Little Homies either. I mean, once again, pretty consistent record so far, but then on this track, Vince practically takes a stab at pop rap. And I don't necessarily hate the hook. It's actually one of the strongest on this entire record, and definitely a personal and emotional one. But the rest of this track just does not nearly seem as confident as the rest of this recording. But outside of that, Vince, at least to me, is very much back on track, and this is some of my favorite rap that I've heard this year. Justin, if you're looking for a more sort of toned down neo-soul or alternative R&B leading tune, check this out. I mean, it is certainly just as dreary and as gritty and as tortured as the rest of this record. And yeah, it's super visual, and it's super gritty and very real. It brings me back to the early days of his stuff. Oh god, I love how unbelievably icy cold Nothing Matters comes off. Late in the album, this is easily one of the most unforgiving and bleak tracks here. I mean, the piano beat on this track, he nailed it. And while Vince's lyrics on this track are at its most nihilistic and depressive, he still remains very introspective in the long run, very visual. It's gritty, it's dark, and honestly, Freeman might be the best track here. This dreary soul sample and sort of boom bap inspired beat once again, they go hard. It's gritty and icy cold, but it also shows Vince, taking a few risks again, getting more experimental, and I love that. If you've fallen off with Vince over the last few years, definitely give this track a listen. And this whole album, because honestly, it's pretty fantastic. And Why Won't the Sun Come Out as a finale, I think it's pretty freaking powerful. I mean, one thing that I will say here, as dark and tortured as this album gets, there's always at least some glimmer of hope on a lot of these tracks, and this album's finale, you call me crazy, it's actually really beautiful. It's a stunning expression that I don't want to spoil if you haven't listened to it yet, but it really does wrap this album up really nicely. I just feel like this album overall is really confident and shows Vince returning to form as an artist, a lyricist, and a creative force in modern hip-hop. I mean, for the last few projects of his, he's had such a strong base, but I feel like his heart hasn't been in it. But this album is everything that I've wanted to hear from him since Big Fish Theory. The lyrics are super introspective and visual. The beats, they're not going to be for everybody, but for somebody who likes his rap beats sort of dark and tortured and perfect for a rainy day, this is a field day of an album. And yeah, is it the most consistent project? Not late in the album, let me tell you, but this is easily some of the best rap that I've heard this year, and something that I can't wait to listen to again. And honestly, I'm just happy to hear Vince this focused and comfortable making his own music again. I'm feeling a strong 8 on this album, but let me know what you all think down below. If you liked the video, be sure to give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let me know down below what you would like for me to chat about in the future. And until next time, have a great day, friends.